I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica, and this is All Things Sensory by Harkla.
We are both certified occupational therapy assistants, and together with Harkla, we are on a mission to empower parents, therapists, and educators to help raise confident and strong children of all abilities.
On this podcast, we chat about all things sensory, diving into special needs, occupational therapy, parenting, self-care, overall health and wellness, and so much more.
We are here to provide raw, honest, and fun strategies, ideas, and information for parents, therapists, and educators, as well as other professionals to implement into daily life.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of All Things Sensory by Harkla. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica. And we have a great topic for you today, just like we always do. But before we get started, we wanted to let you know, or remind you if you already knew, that we have 3 really fun activity digital courses that you can go check out when you're done listening to this episode.
Or right now if you're thinking about it. So the first one helps to improve fine motor skills. The second one works to improve gross motor skills. And another one works to improve visual skills. So clearly these are very on point with our topic today, which is why we wanted to talk about them. And each of these courses, they're video lessons, they're video courses with a variety of activities that you can do at home or in the clinic or in the classroom. And we made them to require just like everyday household, I say everyday household activity or items or like items, but I think they're only everyday activity things in our houses, you know, like shaving cream and balloons and beads. So hopefully when we say everyday items, you actually have them.
And if you don't have them, you should get them and then check out these courses.
Yes. Or check out the courses and then get the coordinating items.
Whichever way you want to do it, we will link these 3 courses in the show notes so you can go check them out. And let's talk about what we're going to talk about today.
Let's talk about what we're going to talk about today because we're going to talk about some really cool things today. Okay, we are going to talk about visual motor today because we have an episode already about ocular motor and visual perception. And if you don't know what these terms mean, episode 28. And then we also have an episode on handwriting, episode 17. But we don't necessarily dive into the topic of visual motor skills.
So that's why we're going to today.
That's why we're here.
We're going to talk about what it is, why it's important, and then at the end, we're going to give you our tips and tricks to help improve visual motor skills.
We'll link all of our goodies in the show notes, research articles, our skills courses that we chatted about already in the show notes. So make sure that you check those out as well.
Okay. What is visual motor?
Very simply, visual motor is the ability to see and move. So to see something and act upon it. So we call this hand-eye coordination. You've probably heard that term, but we take in visual information and then coordinate our motor skills.
So almost everything that we do on a daily basis requires visual motor skills or visual motor integration. Like even me sitting here drinking my coffee requires visual motor integration.
Because if you didn't have good visual motor skills, then you'd probably pour your coffee down your chest.
It'd be terrible.
Yeah. I'm thinking about Trip right now. He's learning to drink from a cup and he brings it to his mouth and sometimes he makes it there, sometimes he doesn't and it goes down his chest, but he gets that sensory feedback and he learns how to do it differently next time.
Well, and that's a good point too, because as a young child, he's probably watching the cup as he's bringing it to his mouth. Whereas now I don't have to do that in the same way as I did when I was young, learning how to do that.
You could close your eyes and still drink your coffee.
I almost missed. But yeah, that's a good point, especially for young children as they're learning how to develop these visual motor skills. They are watching themselves as they do these activities. But anyways, Side note. All the things that we do every day require visual motor integration, getting dressed, eating, cooking, drinking, driving, not drinking and driving, but separately. Oh my God. It just sounded weird when I said it.
Okay, but specific for our children, things like drawing, writing, cutting, painting, brushing your teeth, playground recess activities like kickball, baseball, climbing, jump rope, playing games with friends. Everything requires visual motor skills, and it's one of those things that's generally subconscious. We don't think about it unless we have a challenge with those visual motor skills.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about how visual motor integration works and how those visual motor skills are developed.
Okay.
And it starts at birth. When an infant is born, they can only see a couple of inches away from their face.
I know.
Their visual sensory system is not developed.
It's definitely one of the least developed senses at birth.
When they're born, yes.
So during the first 2 months of life, the baby's eyes are not coordinated and they might seem to like wander and they might even cross, which is normal and typical in that like the first 2 months when a baby is born.
Yep. But by about 4 to 5 months, baby's eyes should be working together in a way to visually track moving objects in their environment.
So by about 4 months, the baby should begin reaching towards objects and grab those objects, maybe bring them to mouth. As they get a little older, transfer them between their hands. Those are all visual motor skills that are beginning to develop.
Yep. And then by around 8 months, give or take, your baby should be crawling or starting to crawl. And this begins the development of even more complex visual motor skills to really see the environment and interact with it on a larger scale versus just from a fine motor standpoint.
We even found an article that said early walkers who did minimal crawling may not learn to use their eyes together as well as babies who crawl a lot.
Now, if you have been around for even just a short amount of time with us, you know that we are big advocates of crawling. We actually have a podcast episode on crawling.
And why it's so important.
So this article, this research article really backed us up on this, especially for that visual motor and visual perception standpoint.
I also want to shout out real quick before we go to the next age range here of visual motor skills and development. There are free services that you can get your infant's eyes checked, and you should take advantage of this resource. It's called Infancy, S-E-E, Infancy. You can go to their website, infancy.org maybe, or .com. We'll link it in the show notes. And find a provider who can do that free assessment because it's free for kiddos under 12 months. And I highly recommend it just to make sure everything's working well
if it's
together.
Free, you may as well.
Yeah, and I just think that like visual challenges, ocular motor challenges often go unnoticed until the child is in school and they're maybe behind or they're lacking so many skills because they haven't been able to see properly or work their eyes together.
Exactly.
Even if your child isn't crawling or skipped crawling, it could be related to their visual skills. So something to rule out and ask yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Next.
by 12 to 18 months, your child should be able to judge distances more accurately, and they'll be throwing toys, throwing balls, and that's just another level of visual motor development.
Mm-hmm. So the child's visual motor integration should be developed by about 2 years old. So this includes hand-eye coordination, depth perception, and as a child ages and interacts with their environment, these skills will just continue to develop and improve without necessarily thinking about them or working on them. They generally will just pick these activities and move towards these activities that require that visual motor integration. And ideally, they should be successful with that.
Yep. And then that visual motor integration continues to improve as the child learns self-care tasks like self-feeding, like Rachel mentioned with Trip is learning, to drink from the cup. And then even self-feeding with utensils, coloring, drawing, eventually writing as the child gets into school, and then dressing skills, higher levels of play skills, all of it just helps to develop and refine those visual motor skills.
All right, let's talk about some signs of visual motor dysfunction. So, how are you going to know if there are challenges that you need to be aware of starting from infancy?
Yeah, now what we're going to list off here, it's not an exclusive list, an exhaustive list. This is just general potential signs.
We're not diagnosing your children. We're not treating them. We're not providing medical advice. These are just things from our therapeutic perspective that we've noticed.
Yes. So in infancy, some signs of potential visual motor dysfunction will be if the baby does not reach for toys within their field of vision.
They don't transfer those objects between their hands, left and right.
They skip crawling.
Maybe while they're crawling, they're struggling to crawl symmetrically or in a controlled pattern, which can also be a sign of like a motor dysfunction, like a physical motor dysfunction.
Now, as your child gets into toddlerhood, if they are not trying to complete shape sorting type toys, that could be a sign.
Maybe they don't point to objects in the environment.
If they do not enjoy and participate in scribbling.
Yeah, every kid loves to scribble, right?
I mean, yeah, they should. They're
it's
like
a developmental milestone.
They're like, whoa, this makes a mark on the paper.
I know.
It's so fascinating.
And then also in toddlerhood, they might not enjoy building toys or stacking blocks.
Mm-hmm. Now, in early childhood, pre-K age, if your child is struggling to participate in ball games, such as rolling a ball back and forth or attempting to catch a large ball that is thrown to them.
Or kicking a ball
Or
that's rolled to
kicking
them.
the ball.
They maybe don't enjoy coloring at all.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is an interesting one because I feel like families will say, oh, my kid doesn't like to color. And it's more of like a hobby. They think of it more as a hobby instead of like an actual developmental skill, whereas coloring, yes, some children enjoy coloring more than others, but it should be like a normal skill that
Something that
develops.
that they can participate in if
Exactly.
asked of them.
Exactly.
Yes. Good point.
What else do we have?
All right, so if your child struggles with dressing tasks, and at this age they're taking their socks off, they're taking their pants off, they're attempting to complete dressing skills.
Another sign of potential dysfunction is if they don't use utensils when they're eating. So they don't use a fork, they don't use a spoon. Maybe they're just struggling to bring the utensils to their mouth.
And I think it's important to remember, especially with this one, that visual motor incorporates that fine motor component as well. So it could be a visual deficit, but it could also be coordinated with a fine motor deficit.
Yep.
And then, difficulty stacking blocks or imitating block structures or building toys could be a sign of visual motor dysfunction.
Especially with the following instructions. Like if you build a simple block structure and the child cannot replicate that block structure, that could be a sign that they're struggling.
Yep. As the child ages and gets into elementary school, if they struggle or if they have below age level handwriting skills.
If they don't enjoy those ball games with peers.
If they're unable to complete buttons or tie their shoes, especially after multiple trials and repetition of teaching them.
Yep. And then maybe they struggle with cutting skills as well. It's a big one that we'll see.
And then before we jump into our favorite activities, just keep in mind that everything is related. So it's all connected. Visual motor is directly related to our visual perceptual abilities, our fine motor skills, and our motor planning. So as we're giving you these activity ideas, it's also going to work on a lot of other skills at the same time.
Yeah, it's the beauty of it.
It is. Okay.
So infants and toddlers, here are some activities that you can do to help improve their visual motor skills.
Or even in infancy to start building those visual motor skills.
During play.
Yeah, during play. If you have a little baby and you're like, how can I help promote their visual motor development? Here's what you do.
Here's what you do. The first thing, weird, I know, it's all connected, but tummy time and crawling, we're going to facilitate those activities.
Yes.
We want tummy time. We want crawling. Yes, we do understand that some Maybe some infants physically cannot crawl because of a medical condition or an underlying condition. We understand that, and that's okay. But for a lot of our families listening, a lot of our therapists, it is something that you can help and facilitate.
Yep. We really like high contrast color toys and books to help start to develop that visual perception.
Yep, using colorful balls to roll back and forth. You can find like a soccer ball. It's got that high contrast as well. Just rolling those back and forth, rolling it in tummy time, rolling it in sitting, in quad, and crawling.
Mm-hmm. We love anything with balloons to help develop that visual motor integration.
Popping bubbles. So if you're blowing big bubbles, those jumbo bubbles are super fun. Popping with pointer fingers or clapping to pop them as well.
Yes, that's actually when I was working with little kids in the clinic, bubbles and popping the bubbles was one of our favorite activities to develop, that hand-eye coordination component.
Oh, yeah. Trip loves them.
As he should.
Yeah.
For our kiddos who are in that pre-K age and above, we love to incorporate different tactile mediums for that fine and visual motor development. So sensory bins, sand or salt trays for drawing and letter practice. I actually really love using Jell-O packets, the powdered Jell-O packets, because it's colorful. And so you just grab a couple of those, you pour it into a tray, and they use their pointer fingers to draw and write letters.
I was just thinking I need to do some Jell-O play with Trip. I haven't done it in a long time, and hide some animals. Those animals that Logan got him.
Yes.
Put some of those animals in there.
Those animals are great.
Okay. Oh, I just love all the sensory activities.
Weird.
Okay, I know.
And then shaving cream and messy play. So we want to incorporate that tactile system and hide objects in the messy play activities and in the sensory bins to help develop that visual motor.
Okay. The next activity would be practicing ball games and working on those skills. So like we'd kind of mentioned earlier in our infant and toddler section, simply just rolling a ball back and forth on the table or while you're sitting in a long sit. So your legs are out in front of you. Just roll it back and forth. Increase the challenge, maybe if you're sitting at the table with 2 balls.
So one of my favorite activities would be to get like the bouncy balls. You have 2 bouncy balls and you sit across the table from your kiddo, and your kid actually holds like 2 solo cups, and they actually hold the cups kind of down below the edge of the table. So you roll a ball across the table to them, and they actually have to catch the ball in their cup as the ball like rolls off the table. And then you incorporate 2 to really facilitate that visual motor integration. That's one of my favorite activities.
We should probably try that one.
It's so good.
Yeah, I like that.
You should start doing that with Trip.
I'm going to, yeah.
Start with 1.
Yeah.
Yes.
He'll like it.
Yes.
Okay. Balloon volleyball. Once again, we love balloon volleyball. Obstacle courses. We love
obstacle courses are great for everything. A really great one would be to incorporate blowing a cotton ball across like along a taped path to really help that visual motor component.
I like taking construction paper and taping 2 sides down so it makes a little tunnel, and making a course with a different colored paper to have them blow their cotton balls through the tunnels.
Yep.
It's a fun one.
I think that might be in our visual skills course.
I think you're right. Yep.
Okay. We love if you can get on a swing or have your child get on a swing and maybe have some bean bags or some stuffed animals, and then have a target. And while your child is swinging, have them throw their items to the target.
Don't forget about hopscotch.
Oh,
that's a classic one. We love hopscotch. Having your child, even if they're able to, draw the hopscotch grid. Another one that we love is folding paper airplanes. You would never think that works on visual motor skills, but honestly,
it does.
Folding paper is so tricky, but it works on these skills to a T. Highly recommend it.
Especially if you
Origami
can,
as well.
yeah, origami. I was going to say, if you can find instructions to fold different types of airplanes or different origami structures, then having to follow those picture instructions to just make it more fun.
This is a fun activity in the treatment setting as well, especially if kiddos are motivated by that sort of thing and they get to throw their paper airplane. You can make that into a functional visual motor activity as well.
Yep.
It's all connected. I love it.
I Spy games are really great, whether it's, like a Where's Waldo, where they're finding it in a picture, or you can even do just between the two of you while you're on a walk outside and you can say, I spy something green. And your child has to look around the environment and call out all the things that are green.
Easy peasy. Clapping pattern games. Believe it or not, clapping pattern activities, following clapping patterns, following patterns with the beat of the metronome, get that multisensory processing really working. Love it.
I like clapping pattern games with a partner as well. So you're clapping and high-fiving with your partner. That is really great for that visual motor.
Yep.
Mazes and dot-to-dot coloring activities are simple, easy ways to work on visual motor integration. These ones are good to do maybe as like an activity in the car while you're driving.
Yeah, this one, both of these really work on like the, what's the word? If they work on more of like the standardized assessments that we do in therapy. So we have these tests that we do. They have to stay inside the lines. So those mazes and dot-to-dots really work on, they're not as functional because they work on like the actual skill that we're testing in OT.
However, they can be functional if your child really enjoys doing them.
Absolutely. You should still participate in them. I'm not saying not to, but
just in a different way.
Just don't do mazes every single day as your visual motor to build the skill so they pass the test, Right.
Good.
So they pass the test.
Good point.
That sounds bad, but yes.
But yeah, for our therapists who are listening, that is a really good point of, yes, you can use these mazes as a treatment activity as long as you're not doing it every single time. It's the only treatment activity you do. Just make sure you're incorporating all these other ones as well.
So the next one is it's an activity, it's a program called Retrain the Brain. This is a fun one because it works on kind of tracing lines and fluidity with the pen or the pencil. And you can incorporate a metronome with this one as well.
No, it incorporates music.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Retrain the Brain comes with music.
But I always do... I don't always do, but I like to do the metronome as well.
To coordinate the movements with it, yes.
And if you don't have the actual program or you don't have access to the program,
true.
Just kind of simulating these activities is a fun one. Yes. We'll link that one in the show notes so you can check it out.
Yep. So grid drawing or coloring kind of goes along with the mazes and the dot-to-dots, but you can find a lot of great grid drawing activities online, or you can get them in like little books
Those
too.
ones are hard for me.
Yeah, those ones are good.
Yeah, they're challenging. Beanbag tossing to targets. If the target is moving, if you're holding the bucket and the child is trying to toss the beanbag to the moving target, that's a fun one.
There's a website that is icanlearn.com. We'll link it in the show notes, but it's canlearn.com. And this is a great website to check out to work on visual and ocular motor skills. It is on a screen, so just keep that in mind.
I really like the activities for this one. You can print them out as well and incorporate them into a session or into the daily activities. Some of them you can, but I really like this website for older kiddos, or maybe kiddos who are struggling with motivation in therapy, or they're struggling, they don't want to fold a paper airplane because that's what little kids do. So it's good for the older ones who are a little bit more stubborn as well.
And then stringing items or any items with like straws or pipe cleaners, you can use beads on pipe cleaners or on a regular string. You can have straws and put hard spaghetti noodles into the straws, and you're really working on that visual motor accuracy with these activities.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's a lot of activities. Holy cow. Super fun. That is the goal, is to make this super fun and to make these activities super fun. You're not going to tell your child, we're going to do our visual motor skills today.
I mean, I wouldn't recommend it.
We're going to play a game today, and the child doesn't necessarily have to know that they're working on these underlying skills. It's just on the plus side.
But you do have to figure out ways to make it fun, because if your child really is struggling with visual motor skills, then these activities could be really hard for them. And often
they most likely will.
Yeah. And oftentimes when these activities are hard, our kiddos don't want to do them because nobody likes to do hard things. You know?
No.
So figuring out ways to make them fun, incorporate obstacle courses, find out what motivates your child or your client, and incorporate those motivating components into these activities.
Listen to our Just Right episode.
Our Just Right challenge.
Yep. If you are new here and you haven't listened to all of our previous episodes, we have
over 200.
A ton. Definitely make sure that you go back and listen to some past episodes. There's tons of great ones in there as well. So check that out.
If you have a topic that we should talk about on the podcast, let us know. And if we don't already have that topic as an episode, we will do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay, make sure you leave a review on iTunes if you're listening on Apple. And if you're listening on another podcast platform, share it on social media, tag us, and share it on social media so that way your followers are realizing that you are taking the time to learn some cool new things with your good friends, Rach and Jessica.
And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and share it.
If you didn't know, this is one of our first episodes with YouTube, with video. So if you're listening to us, if you're used to listening to us and you want to watch us while you listen,
now you can
go to
watch
YouTube
us
and search Harkla, Harkla, and you'll find us. Woo!
Okay.
So fun.
That's it. We're done. We'll talk to you next week.
And we'll see you next week. Woo! Okay. So crazy to say that. Thank you so much for listening to All Things Sensory by Harkla.
If you want more information on anything mentioned in the show, head over to harkla.co/podcast to get the show notes.
If you have any follow-up questions, the best place to ask those is in the comments on the show notes, or message us on our Instagram account, which is at Harkla_family or at All Things Sensory Podcast. If you just search Harkla, you'll find us there.
Like we mentioned before, our podcast listeners get 10% off their first order at Harkla. Whether it's for one of our digital courses or one of our sensory swings, the discount code SENSORY will get you 10% off. That's SENSORY.
Head to harkla.co/sensory to use that discount code right now.
We're so excited to work together to help create confident kids all over the world. While we make every effort to share correct information, we're still learning.
We will double check all of our facts, but realize that medicine is a constantly changing science and art.
One doctor or therapist may have a different way of doing things from another.
We are simply presenting our views and opinions on how to address common sensory challenges, health-related difficulties, and what we have found to be beneficial that will be as evidence-based as possible.
By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or your child.
Consult your child's pediatrician or therapist for any medical issues that he or she may be having.
This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast.
Thanks so much for listening.